Shetland, Britain's most northerly outpost. Through the ages, the sea has cracked and gnawed the bare bones of these islands, gouging a wild and rugged coastline. With the first stirrings of spring, the cliffs exert a magnetic attraction. Answering the call, they come from the four corners of the wild grey Atlantic. Seabirds returning to their ancestral cliffs to breed. And amongst this gathering throng are some very special birds. Shunning land, the puffins have wintered far out on the open ocean. Only the most vicious storms forced them within sight of land. But now they have returned. At first they seem nervous of landing. The hard, unmoving rocks are alien to them. Finding security in the presence of other birds, they begin to gather in small groups on the very edge of the cliff. Just offshore, they bob around in great rafts, inspecting the land from the familiar safety of the sea. With growing confidence, they begin to move away from the cliff edge up onto the slopes, exploring last year's burrows. The puffin's burrow is usually about 1 meter long, the nest itself being a slight hollow at the innermost end. Through the years, a honeycomb of interconnecting tunnels may be formed underground. Puffins usually breed with the same mate year after year. Already, the birds have started to reform pair bonds. During the winter, they go their separate ways. Now, both return to the same burrow they nested in last year. Only if one of the pair has died during the winter will the surviving bird take a new mate. To reaffirm and strengthen the pair bond, the birds indulge in a bout of billing. The colourful beak is largely an organ of display, only assumed during the summer when the brightly coloured horny plates grow over the small black winter beak. These plates simply fall off when the breeding season is over. Puffins have an insatiable curiosity, and a billing pair often attract an audience. An aggressive gape display warns the spectator it is not welcome. But this intruder's interest is more than just idle curiosity. Burrows are at a premium, and he is trying to muscle in on someone else's. With interlocked beaks, they wrestle using twisting head movements. Outstretched wings aid balance, while the feet claw upwards like grappling irons. Surprisingly, beyond a bloody beak, they're rarely hurt in such battles. The rightful owners of the burrow invariably manage to beat off even the most determined challenger. Some burrows do not survive the rigours of winter unscathed. Shallow ones may be caved in by grazing sheep or heavy rain. This pair have lost theirs in a small landslide and must start all over again. The heavy beak is used to loosen the earth, which is then shovelled with the feet. If they're digging in damp soil, it can be a rather messy business. Some puffins, especially those nesting in very damp or stony ground, will collect material to line the nest chamber. When the mood takes them, they go at it with a vengeance. Anything of a suitable size lying around the colony will be picked up. Some birds, however, tend to be a little over-ambitious. These cliffs are notoriously wild, and the coming of spring has done little to tame them. The storm has blown unhindered across 3,000 miles of open ocean. Screaming around the cliffs, it batters itself to death on the unyielding rocks of Hermanus. Able to survive the worst Atlantic gales, gannets are masterful flyers. But returning with nesting material, even they find the turbulent, unpredictable air currents near the cliff hard to maneuver in. With their stubby little wings, puffins seem to enjoy the vicious updrafts. Hermanus is breeding ground for a ruthlessly efficient predator and pirate, the great skua. Already they are establishing nesting territories, but this bird is hunting. Diving to scare the puffins into flight, the skua watches for any sign of vulnerability. Instinctively, they form a wheeling, tightly packed flock. The skua finds it hard to single out a victim from this swirling mass. The puffin narrowly escapes, crash diving to safety. But this skua is hungry and tenacious. As the excitement dies down, the puffins drift back onto the slopes. After its gory meal, the skua washes that formidable beak in a moorland pool. Below ground in the nest chamber, laying has begun. The adults incubate the single egg in turn. Each shift often lasts more than a day. Now the colony is relatively peaceful. During the incubation period, many birds are below ground, while partners spend much of their off-duty period at sea. As the long northern evening draws to a close, puffins begin to drift away from the cliffs. Only birds incubating underground stay overnight. The rest leave to roost on the sea. It is early June, and a forest of kelp is exposed by a low summer tide. This wild and lonely coast is hunting ground for one of Britain's most elusive mammals, the otter. Offshore, a sand eel shoal has been located and puffins gather to feed. Although a superb fisherman, the otter captures most of its prey in shallow water near the shore. These two bitches have adjoining territories and enjoy a rough and tumble when they meet. Few animals have such zest for living. Eventually, even an otter grows tired of play. Peaceful on the surface, it's a different story below. Underwater, puffins are in their element, soaring and gliding through the water with a grace they cannot hope to match in the air. Their wings are a compromise. They must be large enough to keep them airborne, while being small enough to propel them through the much denser medium of water. Now, instead of swallowing their prey, they head for the cliffs, for hatching has begun and there are hungry chicks to feed. As they near the cliff, a new danger is lurking. With flight full of menace, an Arctic skua waits in ambush. Piracy is a way of life to this bird. Suddenly it accelerates. The aim is to panic the victim into dropping its load of fish. Most birds get through unscathed. The Arctic skua's success rate at Hermanus is low. Only 1% of fish-carrying puffins lose their catch to them. One of the highlights of summer on a seabird cliff is the first puffin carrying fish ashore. With a beak full of its favourite prey, sand eels, the puffin wastes little time in getting down its burrow. Puffins seem to be happiest when nesting close together. Within the colony, birds in higher density areas will hatch chicks earlier and rear them more successfully. Now every day sees more puffins carrying fish ashore. Deep below ground, the nesting chamber is a secure nursery, so after a few days of brooding, the chick in warm, soft down is left on its own while both parents are at sea fishing. Adults make only brief visits with food, often simply dropping the fish in the burrow and then returning to sea. Hearing the adult land, the chick moves towards the burrow entrance. Young puffins fed on oil-rich fish grow best. Sand eels and sprats have a high energy content, so if they're available, the adults will catch them for the chick in preference to other species. After a winter of wandering, the Arctic skua has returned to its moorland breeding ground. In a crude scrape amongst the heather, the female covers her hatching eggs. Only a few hours old, and this chick is already exploring. It will soon leave the nest altogether. Nearby, the male stands guard. A great skua is an unwelcome intruder. The two skuas often nest close together, but are always uneasy neighbours. Like a feathered Viking, the great skua returns to its nesting territory, loaded down with booty from a raid. As it regurgitates a stolen fish, the tenderness shown to its own chick is hard to reconcile with its usually violent nature. Smell, bustle and noise. Like some great city, the cliffs are humming with energy and activity. The Guillemot ledges are the cliff's crowded slums. These chicks will soon leave the ledges, leaping to join their parents on the sea below. In the scree at the base of the cliff, puffins mingle with razorbills, which also nest in holes and cracks amongst the jumbled rocks. July. On the evening cliffs, many adults rest after a day of commuting between fishing grounds and nesting burrow. As the season progresses, increasing numbers of immature birds appear on the cliffs. They have stayed at sea, but now they come to practice their social skills and to establish a claim on a burrow of their own, even though most of them won't breed until 5 years old. From the pages of a folk tale steps an almost mythological creature. A white puffin. White puffins figured in the legends of many of the isolated island communities which depended on seabirds. Some were said to be of great age and wisdom. He is a very rare bird and seems to know it. It is the time of the simmer dim, when sunset and sunrise are separated by just a few hours of half-light. The Muckleflugger lighthouse winks out its warning light. Already the brief northern summer is waning. The time has come for this chick to desert the safety of his burrow and make for the sea, his true home. From now on, he is on his own. The half-light cloaks his clumsy progress from predatory skuas and gulls. At last he reaches the very edge of the cliff and pauses before the abyss. Before daylight returns, he must be far away from land and its dangers. For the next 2 years, he will wander the trackless Atlantic. The shimmering sea calls to him with a voice that must be answered. After a moment's hesitation, he takes that final leap into the dark.
Whiffling down from the September sky come the pink-footed geese, losing height like giant snowflakes, dark shapes against the morning light, their calls echoing above the clear waters of a Scottish loch. The geese glide in, crowding together on the ample surface. Here they can rest and recover after the 600-mile journey from their breeding grounds in Iceland. They've traveled in darkness, but during the next few weeks, by day and by night, thousands more will follow the same route. Despite the fact that pinkfeet are legal quarry, the population has prospered in recent years. There are now some 90,000 of these geese, the entire Icelandic breeding population coming to Britain each winter, an increase resulting from stricter control of hunting and the greater availability of arable habitat created by man. Some stay in the north for a while, but many fly south to the wintering grounds. 4,000 years ago, the Ribble estuary on the northwest coast of England was one of a few windows of open land in a landscape carpeted with trees. Knowledge of traditional flight lines was vital and handed down from generation to generation. Now most of the trees have gone and the marshland drained. The geese have learned to take advantage of this, alighting first in barley stubble to eat the spilt and sprouting grain. They're anxious to lay down a store of fat as insurance against less predictable times ahead. As winter approaches, in the relentless pursuit of maximum production from the land, the farmer turns the stubble in preparation for the next crop, covering up the grains that remain. Meanwhile, though, another crop is being harvested, a new but profitable one in this peaty soil. Once they've learned that rich pickings are to be had on the carrot fields, the geese arrive in numbers. Their gregarious habit is a great advantage, the noisy flocks advertising the presence of food to those passing overhead. Though at first sight the milling flocks appear structureless, closer examination reveals that the birds are in pairs, or families. This group has a territorial dispute. The largest family usually wins. Pinkfeet also visit potato fields in midwinter, clearing up tubers discarded by the harvester. This bird paddles like a plover to expose underground potatoes. Unusual behavior for geese, but doubtless an expedient that suits the needs of the moment. Potatoes are no less nutritious to pinkfeet than they are to humans. And with a full crop, there's nothing like a nap to aid the digestion. In March, the breeding cycle begins with the migration north, to staging areas such as the Solway Firth, where waders like the oystercatcher and another species of goose, the barnacle, have spent the entire winter. These barnacles breed in Spitsbergen and will not migrate to their spring staging area for another month. In the lengthening days of April, feeding is very important. The birds need a large store of fat for migration, with additional reserves to take with them to the breeding grounds. Families begin to break up. The pairs are now preparing for next year's brood. The male guards his mate so that she can feed undisturbed. In late April, the flocks are on the move again, heading for Iceland. Spring has not yet come to the breeding grounds, but the geese are on their way, anxious to seek out nest sites. The main breeding area is in the Thjosifjör, an oasis of vegetation beside the Hofsjökull glacier. The first parties fly in about the middle of May, and soon breaks appear in the carpet of snow, signaling the coming of the thaw. The birds are in pairs now, having shaken off their family bonds. The tops of ridges and gravel hills are first to be exposed. More geese are arriving each day, and the pairs patrol the clear patches in search of a nest site. Triggered by this activity, the females have already started to form eggs. And the males are involved in disputes leading to vigorous chases. And occasionally even to fights between rival ganders. Other summer visitors arrive. The clear patches become larger, and overwintered seeds begin to reappear from beneath the snow. The ground is still too hard to make a nest. The pairs feed as much as possible, topping up their fuel reserves for incubation. Rising temperatures accelerate the melt, releasing the fragile tundra from the grip of winter. A male long-tailed duck, splendid in his breeding dress, dives for larvae and crustaceans in a small tundra pool. The swelling streams carry the meltwater to the Thjorsa River, and with it, morsels of food for the purple sandpiper. The beautiful but ephemeral flowers of the purple saxifrage bring color to the warming tundra. The dwarf willow spike stands out from the moss and lichen that covers much of the higher ground. Meanwhile, the pinkfeet continue to squabble over nesting sites. Some have already chosen their territories and defend them against all comers. The female is now heavy with eggs, and she must soon start building the nest. Not the most demonstrative of birds, the courtship rituals of geese witnessed in the wild are rather subdued, sufficient only to ensure that mating takes place successfully. Since pairing is for life, there's little need for elaborate annual rituals. Having rearranged their feathers, both partners return to the chosen nest site, often occupying one used last summer, perhaps even by the same pair. The female alone chooses the site and is soon building the modest nest, while her mate keeps a watchful eye for intruders. Carefully, she arranges material, excavating the shallow scrape with her feet. All over the oasis, many thousands of pairs are nesting, though well spaced out across the tundra. The white wing feathers of the ptarmigan are all that remains of its winter plumage, a sign that spring is now here. A new egg appears in the nest each day until 4 or 5 have been laid. But even in early June, Thjorsa can be swept by severe blizzards. While distant clouds herald the coming of the storm, the goose, her clutch now complete, begins the month-long vigil of incubation. She turns the eggs regularly and takes care in arranging the nest material, making a perfect seal against her flanks. The gander takes no part in incubation, but throughout, he will never be far from his mate's side. For 2 days, the storm rages, while the pinkfeet sit tight. The incubating goose takes advantage of the molten droplets on her back to drink. She doesn't dare to leave the nest and let the eggs cool. The blizzard leaves a white carpet over the tundra, almost covering the incubating birds. But at this time of year, the snow is short-lived. While his mate incubates, the male patrols his territory. Elsewhere in the oasis, other nesters have also been busy. The ringed plover is one of several waders that nest in Thjossever. By mid-incubation, the female Pinkfoot has added a considerable amount of down, plucked from beneath her. This serves both to heat the eggs and to cover and insulate them in her absence. The golden plover and purple sandpiper rely on the cryptic coloration of the eggs and the incubating bird to protect them from predators. Predators like the cunning and voracious Arctic skua, the most common egg-eater on the tundra. Elsewhere, skuas harass seabirds, causing them to disgorge food they're carrying to the nest. But here they rely on plundering the eggs of other birds, especially the geese. A guarded nest is safe, but towards the end of incubation, the hungry goose, accompanied by her mate, leaves the nest to feed. A patrolling skua spots the partly covered eggs and wastes no time in investigating. Predation by skuas is responsible for reducing Pinkfoot clutches from nearly 5 to just over 3 at hatching. At last, the gander senses trouble, but not in time to save that egg. Instinctively, the goose rolls the egg back into the nest cup. Her mate stands nearby, still alert for signs of danger. But finding that the egg is damaged, she begins to eat its contents. This previously unobserved behavior seems sensible, since this food may well allow her to be more loyal to the nest in future. Luckily, the egg was infertile anyway. This is not uncommon in pinkfeet. A pair of teal busily dabble in the shallows, while the majestic hooper swan also waits for his eggs to hatch. As the pair settle down again to the routine of incubation, danger is never far away. The great skua is a recent colonizer of Þjórsárver. The goose keeps her head down until the danger has passed. But this is the middle of June. The long vigil is nearing its climax. As a pair of passing harlequin ducks pause to feed in the river, the gander senses the restlessness of his mate and hears the faint peeping from within the eggs. From now on, both will stay at the nest until the whole family leaves. The chick uses its egg tooth, a horny projection on the bill, to break the shell. But it takes another 24 hours of struggling before the exhausted gosling fully emerges. The young soon dry, but remain around the nest for another day to regain their strength. It's important that all the eggs hatch together. Any laggards will be left behind. That is why incubation starts only when the clutch is complete. While the female busies herself round the nest, her mate waits patiently. His legs are still bright pink. He's kept in reasonable condition so that he can look after the family from now on. His mate, on the other hand, is weak, and she must feed constantly to recover before the molt. The male phalarope, abandoned by his mate after laying, continues to incubate. While on a nearby pool, young great northern divers are already on the water. On the morning of the third day, it's time to leave the nest. There's a long and hazardous journey to the lush rearing grounds. The family hurries along. The midsummer days are long. The midnight sun only just sinks below the horizon. The goslings use all this daylight for feeding, and they grow quickly on the fertile meadows. The phalarope watches over his brood by a marshy pool. And now, the annual wing molt approaches, during which the adult geese lose their powers of flight for a month. Dropped quills litter the tundra, as all the geese in the oasis lose them almost simultaneously. They are very vulnerable at this time. But Arctic foxes, too, have to live. Since there are only 1 or 2 fox earths in the whole of Þjórsárver, their impact on the pinkfeet is slight. After the hatch, they patrol the colony, picking up infertile eggs, which are then in plentiful supply. The surplus is buried on high ground and excavated during the long winter. Humans also took advantage of the flightlessness of the geese. Hundreds of years ago, they constructed these corrals or goose folds and, riding their sturdy Icelandic ponies, rounded up the pinkfeet. Today, the rocks shelter a brood of snow buntings. Nowadays, in Þjórsárver, the geese are unmolested by man. The appetite of the goslings increases as they grow. They spare no effort in chasing a tasty mouthful. Much protein is needed to grow and feather in such a short season. The fearsome-looking great skewer chick is also close to flying. The month-old goslings sense the danger, running to their parents for safety as the adult skewer flies overhead. The brief summer is almost over. The families must soon be off. Both adults and young reach the flying stage together. It hardly seems believable that little over 3 months have passed since the adults first arrived in Iceland. A chill wind blows from the glacier and sweeps across the treeless oasis, the first of the autumn storms. In late August, the last pinkfeet leave Þjórsárver to the foxes and the ptarmigan. The bustle of their breeding cycle is over. All that remains is a scatter of down and some obsolete quills.